This is a screenshot video that focuses on trial courts and their differences with appellate courts. I'm not going to track this article that I have put up on the screen that closely. I will tell you that it's a good article and useful, and I think that the points I will be making will coincide to some extent and maybe be just a little bit different than this article, but it's a good starting point to look at, and we'll bring it down a little bit. By the way, you can see it's written by a judge in Connecticut, but there you go. And he points out that before he began his legal career, he was an appellate lawyer, meaning he represented parties on appeals rather than at trial. I noticed, by the way, that one of the courts, not his court, but one of the courts he used to argue in front of was the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. And we mentioned that court when we're talking in this unit of study and identifying courts in the federal system. Let me just stop the article at this point and just make a couple of observations. Most of us, or most of you, certainly have a sense of what happens in a trial court because what's going on in the trial court is often captured, if not actually on TV, though I recall coming home on any number of occasions and my partner was watching the Johnny Depp trial, uh, but also as depicted in movies and TV shows. So we have a sense. Actually, I just have to say what we see on TV or in the movies or in documentary form is part of what a trial court does. Uh, there's something that happens, and we can talk about it later, to trial court, where before a case actually goes to trial, the lawyers for the parties involved, be it civil or criminal, are asking the court to do things. And when a party is asking a court to do something, we say that the party is making a motion. And maybe the party is asking, in a criminal case, the defendant is asking the court to dismiss the charge on the ground that the defendant's right to a speedy trial is violated. Maybe in a civil case, if it's a divorce case, one of the spouses is asking the judge before trial to give that spouse temporary custody of the children of the marriage. So those kinds of things are happening in addition to trials. But what we could say is that every lawsuit, be it a civil case or a criminal case, contains questions of fact and contains questions of law. Questions of fact. Was the defendant the person who actually murdered the victim? Questions of fact. How extensive were the injuries a person received in an automobile accident? Questions of fact. How much money is one spouse actually earning as a living when a judge determines how much child support needs to be paid? You can have all kinds of questions of fact. But each case also, civil or criminal, has questions of law. The judge is supervising the lawsuit at the trial level where the cases begin. And in that supervising the case requires the judge, kind of like an umpire is required to do at a baseball game, answer certain questions. The judge is answering questions about the law. And if we go into a trial mode, and you've seen this, I'm sure one lawyer will ask a witness a question. The other lawyer, the opposing counsel, will stand up and say, I object, Your Honor, that question under the law is improper because it seeks to bring forward evidence that should not be placed in front of the jury. When that happens, the judge has to make a decision, and the judge's decision is really the judge's answer on the question of law that's been raised by the lawyer's objection. If this case in the trial court reaches a conclusion, very likely, even if it's not at a trial, but let's just stick with the trial, it reaches a conclusion, there will have been the factual questions that are relevant to the case answered, and there will be the legal questions that had to be answered before the case could reach its conclusion. Not every case is a jury trial, but most of them are, and we'll leave it at that for now. And if there's a jury, it's the jury who decides the questions of fact. If it's a judge, it's the judge who decides, not if it's a judge, I apologize. The judge will decide questions of law. What I meant to say is if it is a case without a jury, and some of them can be without a jury, then the judge not only answers the questions of law, but the judge answers the questions of fact. But now let's assume that we've reached the end of our proceedings in the trial court. And as the author of this article says, the person who loses a case in the trial court usually has an absolute right to file an appeal. So let's talk about what's going on in the appellate court. And I might say, because I've done in my law practice, so to speak, I've represented clients at trials and I've represented clients on appeal, and it's like being in a totally different environment. Because if we're going to be doing the appeal, then our claim is going to be, if we're representing the party appealing, our claim is going to be that, and here's what this person says accurately, there's a legal mistake. We have to base our appeal on the claim of a legal mistake. The judge shouldn't have allowed the evidence the judge did. The judge should have prohibited evidence from coming in, and it didn't. A case that some of you might be a little bit familiar with was the Bill Cosby trial for rape in Pennsylvania, and Mr. Cosby eventually was not exonerated, but his conviction was overturned. But there was a very controversial ruling by the judge in that case. It's a controversial ruling that happened with Harvey Weinstein in his New York criminal case, and now happening in his California case, where a person is charged with raping victim A, and the judge permits some testimony from victims who said he raped me as well. So now we've got one charge of rape, but testimony about 3 or 4 different rapes. And you can imagine from the defendant's perspective, the worry is that prejudices the defendant by portraying the defendant as a chronic rapist. And from the prosecution perspective, it permits the jury to understand what might otherwise have been murky evidence and so on. But the claim is made on an appeal that there was a legal mistake. Now, how did the appellate courts function different than the trial court? The appellate courts concentrate solely on whether or not there was a legal mistake. The lawyers prepare their written arguments known as briefs. The day arrives for argument, and the lawyers appear in front of the appellate court. Most appellate courts are multi-member courts, typically of an odd number, 3, 5, 7, 9, depending upon the court, state, federal, what state, what level of the federal court system, etc. and the lawyer steps to the podium, and typically the lawyer is given 15 minutes, longer period of time in the U.S. Supreme Court, but typically 15 minutes to make an argument. Uh, and that means that there are no witnesses called. There's no evidence gathered as there was at the trial court. It's that lawyer making his or her pitch about why there was a legal error, or on the lawyer defending, of course, is why there wasn't a legal error that requires a different result. It's for me, it's always been an exhilarating experience because the judges. It's not like you just stand there and read a written argument orally. You've made your written argument, but now you're there, and before you get too far into your argument, the judges begin to pepper you with questions. So you really have to be very quick on your feet and know the case and be able to answer some very difficult questions. And so the appellate court's job ultimately is to decide, one, was there a legal error made? But significantly, two, was it of such a magnitude that requires the appellate court to undo what happened at the trial court? So this gives us a sense then of the difference between trial courts, evidence gathering tribunals, and appellate courts, tribunals that are devoted to seeing or determining whether a legal error occurred in the lower court. So that'll conclude this video. Thank you.